Hello, hello, this is a brand new Kirblog. Amy was convinced that they were saying Haruo, which I'm like, oh, this song was about me, apparently. Hi, everybody. So, by the time this Kirblog is going up, I will be away on a little vacation to see some family for about a week or so. And I wanted to leave this behind because for those of you who hadn't heard from me shouting about it from the Twitter rooftops and Facebook and all that, is this past week the second of the three anime Netflix Godzilla movies just came out. Godzilla, A City on the Edge of Battle, just released. And I figured, you know what? I've been kind of thinking about maybe doing something like this. I wanted to make a specific Kirblog about working on this project, or rather now technically these two projects in a row. It's been really great because just purely by them being on Netflix, and also just that it's Godzilla, which is just a huge brand name in and of itself. But this is something that I've worked on that a lot of people have actually gotten to see. Via convenience and brand recognition. So I've gotten a lot of really, really nice comments. And I guess in case you guys don't know, if you're listening to this and haven't figured it out, I voiced the main character, Haruo Sakaki, in the English dub of these movies. So I first did the Planet of the Monsters one, which came out, I think, end of last year. And then City on the Edge of Battle came out just this past week or so. So I wanted to do a Kirblog kind of telling the story of how I got to be involved, working on the movies, my thoughts on them, and the character and everything. So yeah, to start off with, I guess I'll just tell the story of how I got the part. Nothing too out of the ordinary necessarily, but it just started off as another audition. I got sent all the core characters for the movie to try out for. I read for Haruo, I read for Martin and Adam and Leland, And it was a very quick turnaround time. This was sent to me from the lovely and talented Laura Post, who is the voice director for the first one. She was not available to come back for the second one, which I'll get to that later. But nonetheless, she sent those out, and she was like, hey, this is a really quick turnaround time. I need these like ASAP. It was sent over the weekend, actually. And so I went ahead and did those. And then she'd also mentioned, hey, if you get a callback, it will have to be an in-person callback audition, which for those of you who don't know what that is, basically when you audition for something, a callback is typically like, hey, we liked what you did the first time. We want to make some adjustments because you're in the running for the role. So usually like a few different people that they're looking at, in consideration will be given callbacks, and then they kind of, make the decision from there. So I had to do an in-person callback audition, which these days is actually somewhat rare. Well, I don't know. Actually, it's probably not rare, but at least for me, it was rare. It was very seldom I ever had to do that. But I was like, sure, of course, because it turned out to be for Haruo. And I was like, well, of course, I would love to get the lead character. So yes, I'm there. So I went, and then shortly after that, I was like, hey, Laura reached out and she said, hey, you're booked for Haruo. You've got a lot of hours and we don't have a whole ton of time to do this. I think I might have talked about this before on maybe some streams and other Kirblogs, but a lot of these Netflix English dubbed shows are, they have very tight deadlines fairly often, to the point where I I sympathize very much so with a lot of the voice directors and engineers and people who have to produce these dubs. But yeah, so we had to get a lot done. But thankfully, we had enough time that we were able to really spend, really finessing the performance. I was very, very, very happy with how my work turned out on both of these movies, actually. Little interesting piece of side trivia, actually. Metfi's, he was another character that I read for as well. Metfi's, Lucian's character, is played by Takehiro Sakurai in Japanese, who is the voice of Reigen. And I think Leland, who is in the first movie, he was played by Daisuke Ono, who is the Japanese voice of Dezel from Tales of Zestiria. So both Japanese actors that I had dubbed in other stuff before, so I was like, oh, it'd be kind of cool if I got to be them, but we'll see what happens. And I booked Haruo, and Haruo was played by the rather illustrious Mamoru Miyano, who is everything from he's Light Yagami in Death Note, he's Tamaki in Ouran High School Host Club, he's Silent in Pokemon, like Riku in Kingdom Hearts, just tons of things. He's like one of the most prestigious Japanese seiyuu in the business, which was cool. And it was the first time I ever got to dub him in a show. So that was amazing. Yeah, so then we went in and, I had only seen trailers, of course. The movie had just come out in Japan very recently. Actually, I don't even remember if it had been in theaters yet by the time we were recording it, but nonetheless, there was a big rush to get the movie all completed. It was going to be, released in like tons and tons of different languages on Netflix. And I guess to blow the lid off this, to be honest with you all, I actually haven't seen a whole lot of Godzilla movies. I did go see Shin Godzilla when that was in theaters briefly. I saw that subbed, and that was fantastic. I feel like that was my first time seeing like a real like Japanese style Godzilla movie, because I really only ever seen like little clips and tiny bits of a lot of the classic ones from way back in the day. Unfortunately, I did also see the shitty American one with what's his face from Matthew Broderick or whatever. I remember liking it probably when I was like 10 or whatever, but I know it's not particularly a good movie, to the point where Toho was like, they just took the American Godzilla monster and just like beat the shit out of it in one of the other movies. I remember hearing that a long time ago. Nonetheless, yeah. So this was kind of my first real exposure to like another Godzilla production, and this was the first Japanese produced animated Godzilla thing. As far as I'm aware, as far as like feature films go. And I gotta say though, because so typically, and I'm sure I've talked about this before too, whenever I get a big part in an anime, if it's possible, I very often will try to watch the episodes of the show in Japanese ahead of time, because I want to get context on what like the full scope of the story is as much as I can, or at least my scenes, But I was not able to do that, so I was kind of just watching the story unfold as we were recording it, to be honest. Which was cool, and actually for the second one in particular, there was something kind of insane about that, but I'll get to that later. Not into spoiler territory just yet, although I presume you guys have watched them if you're seeing this. But nonetheless, this was the first time I had seen. In a while, actually, not even just a Godzilla movie, but like a giant monster movie where like I was invested emotionally into the human characters. And I mean, obviously I have a completely different perspective because I portrayed one of them and, went through the whole story that way. So that's my perspective, and therefore I am, inherently very biased, but I grew to like these characters a lot. I mean, even just watching the two movies myself, I actually like did really care about these characters surviving, and so I was intrigued by them. And then because I know a lot of people are kind of conflicted about, and different people have different opinions about the usage of Godzilla himself, and I guess also just like the kaiju in general in Godzilla movies, because the common complaint that even I've had and a lot of my friends have had from seeing Godzilla movies, both American and Japanese, are that like, oh, Godzilla's only ever in like 5 seconds of the movie, and he's just there for being a threat or whatever. But I think the way he was like positioned in this one, I think was a good usage of just making him like this like natural disaster kind of threat, which is what, from what I understand, he's meant to be like kind of a metaphor for. About like nuclear fallout and that kind of thing. So him being like a natural disaster threat that come to life that the humans are trying to overcome and etc. And in tandem with Haruo as a character actually had a lot behind that I was able to like that I was able to kind of sink my teeth into personality wise, because even though he can seem kind of I don't want to say one note, but like he's just very intense, like almost all the time. He very rarely ever has a chill. But his motives of like of just this whole thing, he has a perception of where like Godzilla not only is a physical threat they have to overcome, but he represents like what humanity has lost in terms of like their pride and their livelihood. It's like he just is so one-track minded on like killing Godzilla will fix everything. It will lead us on the path back to having our humanity again, like our humanity in terms of our, day to day, our comfortability. That's a word. our, our happiness again, our safety. Like once we rid the world of the existence of this monster, we'll be okay. And I think he's internalizing it because of this is in the beginning of the movie, so spoiler question mark. His parents were killed by an explosion from Godzilla, one of Godzilla's attacks, and etc. So he's completely just taking it personally, and not to mention, in the first one where he's kind of surprisingly just thrust into a leader position. His I mean, obviously he's got the know-how and everything, and they trust him that like he somewhat knows what he's doing with in regards to a plan for overtaking Godzilla. But Leland was the leader, and then okay, I guess now we're into spoiler territory. So if you've not seen Planet of the Monsters, here's your last chance. Go watch it. With Leland sacrificing himself, which I think was also quite a nice source of inspiration, because considering they had this kind of little, jokey, broy rivalry, and then, which then turns into a little bit more intense later on with their conflicting ideals. I think Leland's sacrifice was kind of a nice source of inspiration for Haruo, because then when he took the leadership position, and kind of attempts to give this big speech and everything, and tries to get everybody to see, the way that he sees things, it's clear, and even I remember Laura and I were joking when we were doing like the big final fight, the big battle against Godzilla at the end of the first one. There was a moment where like oh, how are we going to be able to get home? Like one of the landing ships or something was destroyed, and he's like, but we're already home. And I'm like, oh man, he's kind of, we were joking about how he's a little crazy. Like he is just so focused on that, but he's intriguing because of that. Like he made for a really interesting character as a result of like that touch of insanity and obsessiveness that he has. So yeah, I was really satisfied with it. I liked the character a lot. I was very happy with how the first one turned out and everything. And and then it was not too long ago that we worked on the sequel, which okay, so now here we go. I'm going to I'm going to get into the real spoilery stuff. So again, so now at this point, if you've not seen Godzilla, A City on the Edge of Battle, it's on Netflix. I'll have links to them in the description. They're excellent. I hope you'll check them out and enjoy them. But now I'm going to get into the spoilery stuff. So, okay. So the second one. First of all, actually, big shout out our second director, Tyler Rhodes, who's the kind of go-to director for Post Haste, the company that got the movie. Laura was very busy, and she was not able to direct this movie, so Tyler took over, and he did an excellent job, so thank you to him. Interesting thing about this one on the technical side, first of all, so I'm sure if you guys have seen any like, behind the scenes thing, or like went to any panel with any anime voice actors, they've probably talked about this before, but the way that dubbing from another language, not just for anime, but in general works, is they cue you up to your line, and they start like a couple seconds before it, and they play 3 beeps, and it goes beep, 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 and then where the fourth like imaginary beep is when you start performing your line. And usually the lines, well, most of the time, unless we have to rewrite stuff, which often happens too, but the lines are written to fit the sync of the mouth animation and everything, and then, we go about it that way. We do it line by line. This was very different. So I've done a fair bit of live action dubbing as well, which is very tricky. And typically for live action stuff, we use a different kind of system that's called, I think it's like it's like something band, I can't remember, but it in reference to not like a band, but like musical or whatever. It's like a band it's like a thing at the bottom of the screen, and the words start playing in sync with the visuals. For live action stuff, especially because like you really have to fit the exact timing, and you have to get all the little like and breaths and stuff and everything. Like it's much more difficult. So it can be good for like finessing stuff and moving shit around or whatever. So, but I'd never used that before for animation. So this was the first time I'd ever had to do that. But thankfully, because I had some fair experience doing live action dubbing, I was able to adjust to it. And actually, what we also did was we ended up kind of going through like scenes. We didn't do it line by line. We would go through like entire maybe like 1 or 2 minute sequences, sometimes even longer, depending, or shorter. Because if there's like a like a cut to meanwhile in the spaceship where the old guys are talking about how Haruo was an idiot or something. But yeah, so it was interesting. Like we'd like make like 3 or 4 passes of an entire scene, and try to get all the all the sound effects, like all the little breaths and reactions and stuff, in tandem with all the dialogue and everything. And yeah, it was so it was very different and a little tricky, a little challenging, but because we were kind of on the same page in terms of like absorbing the story. Tyler was great at guiding me around and everything. It turned out really well. I like seeing the final product. I just watched it a couple nights ago. I was very happy with how it turned out. So. And I think I actually like this the second one even more. The first one was a good establishing point, but the second one had a lot of really intriguing shit in it. And also, I loved the Hotua, the very clearly probably Mothra race of of all these different people and everything. I'm curious as to what role the twins Miana and Maina might play in the future one. If perhaps a certain egg that they're hatching might evolve into some other bug-like monster that can join the fight of the third movie. I don't know what else other than the obvious will be appearing in that one. I will admit, a little sad about Mechagodzilla not getting to like be in the fights. That was kind of what I was expecting, and I think what a lot of people were expecting just by like the posters and everything. That said, I did like the concept of the Mechagodzilla city and like it evolving over the course of all the years they had been gone, and becoming this big area and everything, the nanometal and all that. Shocking, the Bill of Saludo kind of stuff was like took me for a surprise. I remember like as we were going through it, I was like, wait really? But they're our friends, and oh now I'm sad. Oh okay, So that was unfortunate. That said, led to some very intense and scary scenes. The plan also it was interesting also because like the disagreement that the characters have between each other, kind of leading up to right when Godzilla's making his march towards the base and everything. They have to just immediately put it aside and be like, we have to go to battle, like immediately. We just have to do this. So. Their plan of attack, I think, was even bigger and better and cooler to see, using the city as like, this fortress and building the big trap and pouring the liquid nanometal and trying to like just melt and blow up Godzilla's body from the inside out. This, of course, being the gigantic, like mountain-sized Godzilla, that made the one from the first one look like child's play. So that was great. And then, of course, we get into the end. And again, this is the very last turning point, everybody, for spoilers. So I'm going to talk about the very last scene in the movie before the credits. So I had mentioned on Twitter, of course, that this was the first movie the first voiceover project I've ever worked on where I cried. I actually really cried in the booth for a scene where I had to cry. And also screamed my lungs out farther than I can possibly, that I've ever pushed myself in my entire 29 years of living. And of course I am referring to Yuko dying. So when we got to the end, okay, actually, so here's another thing I should mention. So when we were working on the first one, I was saving this for the end of the story. When we were working on the first one, I worked with Laura on something in particular. In addition to often when I can watch a full thing and like ahead of time because I want to know the context, part of the reason is because I want to know what the emotional like high points are. Like if my character that I'm recording has like a really, really big like holy shit, oh my god, kind of moment that like needs to be like the absolute top in terms of intensity, I want to know where that is. And I want to save my energy for it, and also I want to make sure that the other moments surrounding it are like not as like dialed up to 11 or whatever. So when we worked on the first one, I asked Laura, hey, let me know where like the biggest, because I'm sure I'm gonna have like a big scream at some point, during the battles or whatever. Let me know when we get up to that, and because I want to really go 110% on it. So she did, and it was, of course, in the first movie, it was the, now go to hell, you bastard, when he blows up. We did, I think, like 3-ish takes or so of that, maybe more, I can't remember. But I was happy with that, so we saved that for the end. And So what was convenient about this one was, I let Tyler, the director, know the same thing in terms of like, let me know when we reach that point. And he's like, no problem. So, when we were getting to kind of the intense, yelling at Galagu and Belube about the disagreements with the nanometal and fusing with the city and everything, I was getting pretty intense about like, what's the point if we can't keep our humanity, what's at the cost of defeating Godzilla, et cetera. And Tyler was like, just so you know, we're not there yet. We're not at the high point. I'm like, all right, no problem. I'm keeping it contained. So when we reached the last scene, he just played me the footage of, Yuko spills out of the mech and, the nanometal goop flows out of her eyes. Haruo has a fucking breakdown and then does the big screen roll, the big scream, roll credits. He just played it. And because again, I didn't see the movie ahead of time. I didn't know anything. He didn't tell me anything. He just plays the footage. And I remember actually getting legitimately fucking angry. I was like, they just play it and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me right now? I was mad. Like I was so genuinely upset that they killed Yuko off after everything, after all of, and then they have the romantic stuff in the middle of the movie and and all that. And I'm just like, oh my God, are you serious? And it actually made me upset. So then when we rolled take, and for the record, we did everything during that run. We did everything up until right before the big scream first. We just did a couple passes of that. So I did like 3 or 4 passes of like, Yuko, stay with me, and the crying and the sobbing and everything. And I actually started fucking crying. Like, I was so legit affected by this. I was so upset after, and especially because after like recording the like, the tender moments that they have earlier, not that same day, but like, throughout, the week or two we were working on this, I was getting emotionally invested. And actually the interesting thing was Christina V, who plays Yuko, she wasn't even recorded yet. I was hearing a lot of the other actors because they were finished when I went in to do my stuff. But I hadn't heard Christina yet, so I didn't get to hear her until I watched the movie like just a couple days ago, which she was fantastic. Everybody in the cast was fantastic. But yeah, so I did a couple passes, and there's, I don't know if that's the one they use because I can't remember, but there is like 1 or 2 of those where I actually have tears streaming down my face, and it is insane. And I'm like, okay. And then, so then we saved the scream for last, and I did 2 takes. So the first one, I went like too far. It was like it like didn't sound good either. It was like it was my voice was like cracking a little bit. I was trying to be really intense and emotional, but it was just insane. And I immediately after I finished the first take, I just like kneeled down and I was like, hold on, give me a minute. My lung hurts. Oh God, I'm scared. Like I was actually worried that I caused some like permanent damage, and I was like, oh Jesus, no. And I'm fine now, like everything's okay, and I'm fully recovered from that because this was like a couple months ago or whatever it was. But yeah, it was a little scary, and I was almost tempted. I almost wanted to like pull up like one of the biggest like intensive screams from like Dragon Ball Z or something like that to look at and just like do that right afterward. But I'm like, no, you know what? I don't need it. I'm just gonna do it again. I'll do it right this time. And Tyler only allowed me to do 2. So I only had 1 more shot. So I did it, and that's the one that you hear in the movie, is the second one that I did. And I remember when I finished it, I was like, I'm not satisfied with it. I feel like it could have gone a little bit better. But I did my best, and, threw it in there. And you know what? And when I saw it played back, I was, you know what? This is fine. I'm happy with this. I'm okay with the things that are currently unfolding. So... yeah, but all in all, it's one of the proudest performances I've ever given. I'm very, very, very happy and very satisfied. I thank you guys very much, by the way. I've been getting a lot of really kind comments, off topic for a second, but about Octopath. People have been saying a lot of really nice things about my work on Therion. That said, though, Haruo, with Godzilla 2 coming out, that's the reason I wanted to do this Kirblog in particular, is because I had a lot to say about it. And not to say that I'm not proud of my work on Octopath either, but yeah, I mean, I'm super, super proud of what I did on Haruo, and I'm really happy with both of these movies. And, like I said before, because of my perspective, I'm inherently biased. I don't even know if they're like considered to be good movies. I know a lot of people have like, issues with them, and that's totally fine. I'm just happy that people have checked them out. I'm glad that people like how the dub has turned out, and they like my work on it, which I very, very, very much appreciate. And and we have confirmation from the third one will be happening. I don't know when or if we'll be dubbing it. I presume we probably will at this point. And the only thing we know about it is that Ghidorah will be involved, or Ghidorah, and hopefully some other monsters. I don't know. My bets are on Mothra showing up at some point, mayhaps, but we'll see. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So that's gonna do it. Thank you guys for listening and tuning in, and thank you also if I presume if you've listened this far, thank you for checking out the movies, and thank you for all the kind words about about our, like, not just my work but everybody's work. Christina Bosco, Chris Hackney, Robbie Damon, Taylor Henry. I'm gonna forget people because I suck. Rich Brown. Everybody was Tyler and Laura, our directors. Shannon Wilson, who was the writer, big Godzilla aficionado. He was co-directing a little bit of the first one as well. Everybody at Post Haste, they're all wonderful, and major shout outs and thanks to them for everything. And so. All right. Well, that said, I'm off to vacate for a little while. Obviously, I will not be streaming for the next week or so, but I want to get back to it as quickly as I can, and I'll get back to Kirblogs and everything as well as soon as I can too. But so thank you so much for tuning in. If somehow you did not see them and you listened to this whole thing, I'll have links to the two Godzilla movies in the description below. And, here's to the third one. And I guess if you have any other questions or comments or feedback about the movie, if you have questions or topics or ideas or anything to present for the mailbag section of the next Kirblog that I do when I get back from my vacation next week, leave a comment about that too if you like. And I'll catch you on the next one. So thanks very much and have a great weekend, and bye.